There's a number that's been floating around Brown circles this week, and once you hear it, it's going to completely shift the way you've been thinking about the most controversial decision this franchise has ever made. Not a little shift, a full head-turning, wait, what kind of shift. Because for the last few years, most of us have operated under the assumption that the Deshaun Watson contract was an anchor around this organization's neck, a financial catastrophe that was going to drag Cleveland down for the better part of a decade. And look, that take wasn't unreasonable. It was based on everything we could see at the time. But what we couldn't see, what almost nobody was paying attention to, turns out to be one of the most important moves the Browns front office ever made, quietly, behind the scenes, with zero fanfare. And then there's a second story that matters just as much, though for completely different reasons. While the Watson situation has been dominating the headlines, there's another quarterback in that building whose future in Cleveland is becoming more uncertain by the day. A guy who, not long ago, was actually the named starter for this team. Now, he might be one roster cut away from being gone. And the question isn't whether he leaves, but whether Cleveland can get anything in return before that happens. Two stories. Both of them tell you something real about where this franchise is headed. And by the time we break everything down, I think you'll come away with a very different picture of the 2025 Cleveland Browns than the one most national media is painting right now. Let's get into it. Let's not sugarcoat anything here. The Deshaun Watson trade has been, by almost every measure, a disaster. That's not an emotional take. That's just what the numbers say. Back when Cleveland sent 3 first-round picks and 6 total draft selections to the Houston Texans, the expectation was simple. The Browns had finally found their guy. After decades of quarterback misery, and I mean decades, because this fan base has lived through more bad QB situations than any group of fans deserves, the organization had gone all in. They hadn't just signed a quarterback, they had mortgaged the future for one. The contract itself was staggering, $230 million fully guaranteed. At the time, it was the richest contract in NFL history. And in theory, that kind of deal only makes sense for a generational talent, someone you're building everything around, someone you expect to be under center for the next decade. Instead, what Cleveland got was 4 seasons of heartbreak, false starts, and an avalanche of missed games. Watson has appeared in just 19 games as a Brown. 19 for a quarterback on a $230 million contract. He missed 38 games due to injuries and another 11 due to his suspension. When you add all of that up, he has been unavailable for 49 games, nearly 3 full regular seasons worth of absence. The math on that is brutal no matter how you frame it. And when he has played, the numbers haven't exactly made a case for his defense. A 9-10 record as the starter, 3,365 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Those are backup-level numbers attached to franchise quarterback-level money, and that disconnect has fueled years of frustration not just in Cleveland, but around the entire league. Nationally, the Watson trade became a cautionary tale, a punchline even. Every time some other team considered a bold quarterback move, the Browns got brought up as the example of what not to do. That narrative got exhausting fast, especially for fans who were watching it all unfold in real time, helpless to do anything about it. But then something changed. Not on the field. The on-field reality is what it is. What changed was the financial picture, and when the full details came out, it reframed the entire conversation in ways nobody was expecting. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because this piece of the puzzle was hiding in plain sight and almost nobody was talking about it. In 2023, the Browns restructured Watson's contract. That much was known at the time. What didn't get nearly enough attention, what most people glossed right over, was one specific component buried inside that restructuring. As part of the new deal, Cleveland purchased injury insurance covering Watson for 2023, 2024, and 2025. At first glance, that might sound like standard front office paperwork, a cautious footnote, something the accountants handle and nobody else thinks about. But here's why it matters enormously. Watson missed significant time in 2023 with a shoulder injury. He missed a large chunk of 2024 as well, and then he missed the entire 2025 season while recovering from a torn Achilles. That insurance policy covered all 3 of those years, and the payback that's coming to the Browns because of it is staggering. According to reporting from Mike Florio, Cleveland is set to receive approximately $88.781 million in salary cap credits as a result of that insurance coverage. Those credits don't all land at once. They're spread across multiple seasons, with allocations scheduled for 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029. It's a long runway, but the total figure is enormous. Think about what that actually means. The Browns are still on the hook for every dollar of Watson's $230 million guaranteed contract. That part hasn't changed. He gets paid no matter what. But the cap credits flowing back to the organization reduce what Cleveland is effectively absorbing. When you run the numbers all the way through, the franchise's real financial burden on the Watson deal comes out to approximately $141.21 million instead of the full $230 million. Now, $141 million is still a massive number. Nobody in their right mind is calling that a win. But the difference between $141 million and $230 million is $88 million. And in NFL terms, $88 million is franchise-altering money. That's multiple free agent signings. That's draft pick capital. That's flexibility the Browns were widely assumed not to have. The fact that this restructuring happened at all, and that the insurance component was included, suggests the front office was thinking ahead in a way that hasn't gotten nearly enough credit. They saw the injury risk, they protected the organization, and now, while everyone else is still writing the obituary on the Watson era, Cleveland quietly has more breathing room than anyone realized. Here's the thing about this insurance revelation that goes beyond just the dollar amount. It changes the story we've been telling about the Browns front office. For the past couple of years, the narrative has been that Cleveland is trapped, cap-strapped, handcuffed to a broken quarterback and unable to build around him because the financial penalties for any move are too severe. That storyline has been repeated so many times that it basically became accepted wisdom, even inside certain Browns fan circles where people had all but given up on the near-term future of this roster. But if the effective cost of the Watson contract is closer to $141 million over the life of the deal, the picture looks different. It means the front office has had more flexibility than analysts were accounting for. It means the decision to draft Shedeur Sanders, a first-round investment in a completely new quarterback direction, wasn't a desperate move made from a position of weakness. It may have been a calculated one made from a position of slightly more stability than outsiders understood. It also recontextualizes some of the other moves Cleveland has made in recent months: the hiring of Todd Monken as head coach, the investment in the supporting cast, the willingness to build a genuine quarterback competition rather than just handing the job back to Watson by default. None of those decisions look like the moves of an organization that's drowning. They look like the moves of a front office that has a plan, however imperfect that plan might be. None of this erases the trade itself. The draft capital that went to Houston is gone. The years of poor performance on the field are part of the permanent record, and $230 million is still a lot of money for results that don't come close to justifying the investment. But the difference between an organization that's completely buried and one that's got some room to maneuver, that matters. That changes what's possible going forward. And what's possible going forward is exactly what makes this upcoming season so fascinating. Because now that the financial picture is clearer, all the pressure shifts back to where it was always going to land eventually: on the field. Forget the money for a second. Forget the cap credits and the insurance policy and the restructured numbers. When training camp opens and those pads go on and it's time for somebody to run the Cleveland Browns offense, none of that financial engineering matters at all. What matters is whether Deshaun Watson can still play quarterback in the National Football League at a level that justifies everything this organization has built around him.
And that question, that genuine, uncomfortable, nobody really knows the answer question, is what makes this the most pressure-packed situation any Browns quarterback has ever faced. And that's saying something, because this franchise has put quarterbacks in some brutally uncomfortable positions over the years. Watson spent all of 2025 focused on one thing: recovering from a torn Achilles. That's a serious injury for any athlete, but for a quarterback who relies on mobility and improvisation, which Watson does, or at least did at his best, it's the kind of injury that can fundamentally change what a player is. Some guys come back from Achilles tears and look exactly like themselves. Others come back a little slower, a little more hesitant, and never quite regain the burst that made them dangerous. Nobody knows which version of Watson shows up until he's actually out there competing at full speed under real pressure. What makes the situation even more complicated is the environment he's walking back into. Todd Monken is now the head coach, bringing a fresh offensive system and a staff that doesn't have any particular loyalty to the Watson era. Monken isn't inheriting a situation where Watson is automatically the starter. He's inheriting a competition, and he's made it clear, repeatedly, that he intends to let that competition play out in training camp rather than hand the job to anyone based on reputation or contract size.
That's actually the right call, but it puts Watson in a position he's never been in before as a professional. He's competing for his job. At 30 years old, coming off an Achilles tear, with a first-round rookie breathing down his neck every single day at practice. During OTAs, the early reports out of Berea have been genuinely surprising. The competition between Watson and Shedeur Sanders has been described as much closer than most people anticipated. There's no coronation happening, no moment where observers have looked at the two quarterbacks side by side and said definitively that Watson is clearly ahead. If anything, the reports have carried an undercurrent of genuine uncertainty about who's going to win this job. And that uncertainty alone tells you how different this situation is from anything Watson has experienced in Cleveland before. Going into camp, Watson still holds the experience advantage. He knows what an NFL defense looks like. He's been in big games. He's had moments, even in Cleveland, where the talent that made him a franchise-altering target was visible. But experience only carries so much weight when the results haven't backed it up. If he struggles early in training camp, the conversation is going to shift fast. Fans will get loud, media will start asking pointed questions, and inside the building, the people making the final decision will be watching every single rep. This is Watson's last real opportunity to change his legacy in Cleveland, to turn the trade from a cautionary tale into something at least approaching a complicated success story. The tools are there: a fresh staff, cap flexibility, a legitimate receiving core, and a full offseason to prepare. But whether those tools produce something meaningful depends entirely on what Deshaun Watson looks like when it actually counts. There's a version of this story where everyone focuses on what Watson needs to do, and Shedeur Sanders gets treated like background noise, the young rookie who'll get his shot someday, just not yet. That version of the story is already outdated. Sanders is not playing the role of a patient apprentice. He's competing aggressively. From every account coming out of Berea, he has walked into that building with the energy of someone who believes the starting job is genuinely available, because it is, and who isn't planning to wait his turn if his performance says otherwise. That's not surprising when you consider where Sanders comes from. He played in one of the most scrutinized programs in college football at Colorado. His every throw was analyzed, celebrated, criticized, and dissected by a media circus that followed his father, Deion Sanders, as closely as it followed the team. Whatever you think of that environment, it produced a quarterback who is completely unfazed by pressure and attention. He's been under a microscope his entire career. Cleveland isn't going to rattle him. What's fascinating about the current competition is what it means structurally for Watson. Every day that Sanders looks good in practice is a day that Watson's window gets a little smaller.
Not because anyone is in a rush to make a decision, but because the math of the situation is what it is. The Browns drafted Sanders in the first round. They didn't do that to let him sit on the bench for 3 years. They did it because they believe, or at minimum, they're open to the possibility, that he might be the long-term answer at quarterback. If he proves that in training camp, the decision makes itself. And if Watson does win the starting job, the pressure doesn't go away. It might actually intensify. Because now you have a first-round rookie waiting behind him, watching every game, ready to step in the moment the coaching staff decides the moment is right. That's not a comfortable situation for a veteran quarterback who needs confidence and rhythm to play at his best. Every incompletion, every sack, every 3 and out is going to come with a question attached. Is it time to make a change? Sanders has real limitations coming into his first year. There will be growing pains. A rookie quarterback learning an NFL system under game speed pressure is going to make mistakes, and those mistakes will be magnified in Cleveland, where expectations and frustration have been building for years. Nobody should pretend the transition will be smooth. But the fact that the conversation is even this competitive, the fact that Watson doesn't walk back into this building as the automatic, unquestioned starter, says everything about where things stand. Sanders isn't just a backup, he's a referendum on the Watson era, and every day of camp is another vote being cast. While Watson and Sanders have been commanding all the attention, there's a third quarterback in that room who has essentially become invisible. And his situation might actually be the most straightforward of all, because unlike the other two, his future in Cleveland appears to be almost entirely decided already. Dillon Gabriel, third-round pick out of Oregon, the guy who, after Cleveland moved on from Joe Flacco last season, was actually named the starting quarterback for this team. Let that sink in for a second. Not long ago, Gabriel was the guy, the one they turned to when everything else fell apart. He stood up in front of the media, took the snaps, carried the offense. That's not nothing, but the landscape around him has shifted completely since then. The Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders. They added Talon Green, a 6th-round pick out of Arkansas, as another developmental option. And Todd Monken, when discussing the current quarterback competition publicly, hasn't mentioned Gabriel's name, not once, not even in passing.
In football, silence is communication. When a head coach talks about who's competing at quarterback and doesn't include a guy who's already on the roster, that tells you exactly where that guy stands in the pecking order. Gabriel isn't being considered for the starting job. He almost certainly isn't competing for the backup role either. With Sanders and Green both occupying that development space, there simply isn't a clear lane for him to contribute to this roster in 2025. The question, then, is what the Browns do about it. Do they simply release him when final cuts come around and let him walk out the door for nothing? Or do they do the smart thing and see if there's any trade value to extract before that happens? If you're running the front office, the answer should be obvious. Even if Gabriel's market value is modest, even if the best offer you can find is a conditional late-round draft pick, getting something back is better than getting nothing. And there's a genuine case to be made that Gabriel, with his NFL starting experience and his left-handed throwing motion, has enough value to at least make the phone ring a few places. Not every trade destination is realistic, and not every team that needs a quarterback is the right fit. But when you map Gabriel's specific skill set and situation against the current league landscape, 3 possibilities stand out as genuinely plausible. The first one, and probably the most intriguing from a storyline perspective, is Atlanta. The Falcons' connection runs deeper than just roster need. Gabriel would be reuniting with former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski and former offensive coordinator Tommy Ree, 2 guys who already know his game, already understand his tendencies, and already have an established relationship with him. That familiarity matters more than people often give it credit. A quarterback transitioning to a new team always has an adjustment period. Reconnecting with coaches he's worked with extensively eliminates a lot of that friction. There's also a purely football reason why Atlanta makes sense that has nothing to do with relationships.
Gabriel is left-handed. Atlanta's top two quarterbacks are also left-handed. For receivers, this isn't a trivial detail. The ball spins differently out of a left-handed quarterback's hand, and the footwork and timing adjustments required to track it are real. Keeping the entire quarterback room left-handed creates continuity and consistency for pass catchers in practice, which has genuine value during an NFL season. Trevor Siemian currently holds the third-string job in Atlanta. Gabriel could realistically compete for that spot, and in the right circumstances, he might even win it. From Cleveland's perspective, the ask wouldn't need to be enormous. A conditional pick, perhaps with a veteran depth piece coming back the other way, could get this done. The second destination is Indianapolis. The Colts situation is fluid right now, and it revolves around Anthony Richardson. Earlier this offseason, reports surfaced that Richardson had received permission to seek a trade, with multiple teams, including Cleveland at one point, linked to him. If Indianapolis does eventually move Richardson, their quarterback depth chart takes a serious hit. Daniel Jones is the guy, but behind him, Riley Leonard and Easton Stick aren't exactly inspiring confidence. Gabriel, who has legitimate starting experience within an NFL organization, would represent a meaningful upgrade over what Indianapolis currently has in reserve. He's been under center in real games, under real pressure, with real consequences. That experience has value for a team that's still figuring out its long-term quarterback situation. Even a conditional seventh-rounder, something that activates only if Gabriel makes the active roster for a certain number of games, would be worth exploring. It's low risk for Indianapolis and at least gives Cleveland something rather than nothing. The third option involves Jacksonville, and it's a little more complicated because it requires reading the Jaguars' financial situation correctly. Jacksonville is tight against the cap entering the season. They're going to need flexibility, particularly to prepare for future contract extensions on the offensive side, with Parker Washington and Brian Thomas Jr. both in line for significant paydays down the road. To create that space, the Jaguars may need to move veterans after the June 1st deadline. Eric Armstead, their defensive tackle, could reportedly free up close to $15 million in cap room. Offensive tackle Walker Little could generate roughly $12 million. Neither of those players would be traded straight up. That's not how this would work. But Gabriel could be part of a larger package. If Cleveland and Jacksonville put together a deal that makes sense for both teams, Gabriel becomes a secondary piece rather than the centerpiece. The Browns potentially gain a veteran like Armstead, who at 32 years old could provide leadership and experience alongside first-round pick Mason Graham on the defensive line. Or they could get Walker Little, who becomes interesting insurance if rookie left tackle Spencer Fano struggles with the transition to the NFL level.
None of these scenarios are guaranteed. None of them are even necessarily likely. But the broader point stands regardless of which destination you find most compelling. If Dillon Gabriel doesn't have a future in Cleveland, then waiting around until the last possible moment to release him serves nobody. The smart play is to start making calls now and see what the market will offer. Even the smallest return is better than watching him walk out the door with nothing attached. When you step back and look at both of these stories together, the Watson insurance revelation and the Gabriel situation, they're actually telling the same larger story about where this franchise is right now. Cleveland is in transition. Not the kind of chaotic, everything is broken transition that's easy to dismiss, something more nuanced than that. This is a team that made a massive bet, paid the price when that bet didn't work out, and is now quietly putting together the pieces of a next chapter, while the echoes of the previous one are still reverberating. The insurance money is proof that the front office was smarter about protecting itself than anyone gave them credit for. The Watson competition is proof that they're not letting sentiment or contract size dictate their decision-making. The exploration of Gabriel trade options is proof that they're thinking clearly about roster construction, rather than just letting situations drift until they resolve themselves by default. None of that makes the Watson trade good. It was still a staggering commitment of draft capital and guaranteed money that hasn't come close to producing a return on the field. That part of the record stands exactly as it is. But the Browns are trapped in an impossible situation with no way out is less of an accurate description of reality than it was 18 months ago.
The cap picture is better than advertised. The quarterback room has genuine competition. The coaching staff is new and motivated, and the pieces around the skill positions are solid enough that whoever wins that starting job will have real weapons to work with. The wild card, and it's a massive one, is what Dillon Gabriel actually looks like when real football starts. If he comes back healthy and recaptures even a significant portion of his pre-Cleveland form, this team could be legitimately competitive. If he's a step slower, a beat hesitant, and the Achilles recovery has taken something from him that he can't get back, then the clock on the Shedeur Sanders era will start ticking very quickly. Training camp is going to answer questions that no amount of OTA reporting, financial analysis, or quarterback competition speculation can resolve. When the pads come on, when the defense is flying around, when the game situations start to feel real, that's when you find out who people actually are. And for the 2025 Cleveland Browns, the answers that emerge from those practices and preseason games will set the trajectory for everything that comes after. There's a version of Cleveland Browns history that's essentially just a long list of answers to the same question, all of them wrong. Bernie Kosar, Vinny Testaverde, Tim Kumpch, Derek Anderson, Colt McCoy, Brandon Weeden, Johnny Manziel, Josh McCown, Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Briscoe, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson. Each name felt at some point like a potential solution. Each one, for one reason or another, didn't end the search. Now there are two new names on that list. A 30-year-old veteran coming off his second major injury in 3 years, trying to prove that the investment wasn't a mistake and that there's still something left in the tank. And a rookie from Colorado who walked into a building where everyone is watching him, competing for a starting job in a league where most first-year quarterbacks get nowhere near one, carrying the weight of being the most important draft pick this franchise has made since the trade that's still haunting them. The insurance money helps. The cap flexibility matters. The fresh coaching staff brings energy and accountability that this team is badly needed. But none of it changes the fundamental truth that defined this franchise since it came back into existence. The Cleveland Browns live and die by the quarterback position, and they haven't found the answer yet. Maybe Deshaun Watson finds something in himself this summer that changes the conversation. Maybe Sanders walks into training camp and shows the kind of readiness that usually takes quarterbacks years to develop. Maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. A collaborative, competitive situation where both players push each other to be better and the team wins because of it. What's clear is that the upcoming season isn't just another year on the schedule. For Watson, it's a last chance to rewrite his legacy in Cleveland. For Sanders, it's the beginning of what could be either a franchise-defining career or a very expensive lesson in how hard this league is. For the organization, it's the moment when all the restructuring and insurance policies and draft picks and coaching changes either start making sense together or they don't. Training camp can't get here fast enough. Whatever happens on that field is going to be a lot more revealing than any financial report or OTA observation. The Browns are in the middle of something, whether it's the beginning of something genuinely new or just another chapter in a very long struggle. That's the question that football is about to start answering. And if you've been watching this team through everything they've been through all the quarterbacks and all the draft picks and all the moments that almost felt like a turning point, you already know better than to assume you know how this one ends.